Good evening, everyone. Today is the Masterclass 34 of Practical Cities Initiative. And today we are having with us Dr. Umamaheshwaran, sir. First of all, thank you, sir, for coming today on this platform. Dr. Umamaheshwaran, sir, is an expert in the area of spatial temporal modeling and analysis. He handles diverse project portfolios which include hazard risk modeling, vulnerability analysis, climate variability analysis, urban environmental modeling. He is a risk and resilience expert and has done PhD in environmental modeling also. Uh, I hope everyone who are viewing this is aware about the recent flood that has happened in New York, Bihar, Maharashtra, and various places across the country. So we recently did a poll on all our platforms that what does people want to learn about in the climate change theme that we are currently ongoing in Practical Cities Initiative. So 34%, which is the maximum people have told that flood management and resilience part are they wanted to know more about that. So, sir, from you as an expert and you have worked in this domain as in flood domain, sir, wanted to ask that see, flood is a recurring event and phenomena that there are various reasons that give rise to flood and flood or flood kind of situation. How can cities or young professional do to manage this flood and how can cities be resilient of flood in future? Yes, over to you.
Thank you, Jay, and very glad to be part of the Practical Cities lecture series. And of course, urban flood management is something which has evolved over the time. And given the advancement both in terms of the technology and also the kind of the risk which is panning out because of the climate variability and change, it becomes quite important for us to understand both the complexity of the urban fabric before getting into addressing the situation of flood management. Usually what happens is many times you try to create certain systems, certain mechanisms to move the flood from one location to another location. And that's what we are all as practitioners trying to do, because what used to be floodplains are now heavily populated city centers. And how it's not, the idea is not to avoid the rain from coming in, because the water is going to be very useful for multiple other purposes. And the idea is how do you store the water, retain the water, reuse the water, and also in the process try to minimize the extent of damage and loss it causes, especially during the extreme events. With that, I would like to take the audience today through four key aspects of urban flood management. The first is what is the situation, understanding what's currently happening and why it is the way it is, because many times we try to intervene within the system by introducing policy, introducing some kind of infrastructure to manage these things. And it's more important to understand why the way things are panned out, and what do we have with us in terms of tools, technologies, processes, and systems where we can intervene and what can be done, where I'll be talking about a few case studies, both nationally and also internationally, in terms of urban flood resilience. Looking at the current scenario, we all know that in India, the urban population has jumped quite a bit, starting from 1990. Because if you look in terms of the pre-globalization, our urban population was growing at the rate of 1% every 10 years. But post-globalization, the population has been growing at the rate of pretty much, it has been doubling, starting from 11 to 22% in 1990 to 2001, and then going all the way to 33% in the 2011 statistics. And this trend is going to continue as more and more people start to populate the urban landscape. It becomes heavily complex addressing a scenario such as flood. The second thing is, like, you rightly mentioned, I mean, we all are hearing the news of Ida and the extent of damage which it has been causing. But if you look at India, pretty much almost all the coastal cities and also cities which are in the central India have been getting impacted by flood time and again. So flood is not something which is a recent phenomenon. It has been occurring quite a bit. And what has happened with respect to climate change is the intensity and the variability of the event has changed quite drastically. If you look in terms of the average precipitation starting from 1901 to 2011, of course, you can see some years we get more rainfall and some years we get rainfall, less rainfall. But the percentage of variation was well under 10%. But if you look at post 1971 or 1970s and more recently from 1990 to 2011, the extent has increased quite drastically. Of course, in a period of 70 years, we had one or two events which were exceeding 10%, but pretty much we are having similar kind of an event every few years in the recent past. And one of the key trend is because of the strong El Nino effect and also the La Nina effect, and also the impact of climate change and also the impact of urban terrain and urban systems. So what we are currently seeing as a part of the climate variability and changes, there is a lot of decreasing, there is a decrease in the number of rainy days. And what I mean by the decrease in number of rainy days is even though the average precipitation, average accumulated precipitation over the year remains the same, the rainfall of such quantum occurs within a very short duration. And that's why we are seeing events where there is a 100 rainfall within 24 hours or 200 rainfall within 24 hours. And the event which occurred in New York and also recently in Chennai and also Mumbai and Calcutta are all events exceeding more than 200 to 300 of rainfall within a short span of 24 hours. Whereas these places has an annual rainfall of 3 to 4x of that quantum. So whatever is the annual rainfall, you're getting it in a very short duration. And also the intermittent variability. If you look at this picture, this is the picture of Chennai suffering, and where people are suffering from water scarcity and gathering for collecting water. You may all think that yes, the 2019 Chennai drought was quite well known and it was well published and well researched around, and also the municipal corporation took quite a number of steps. So this, even before that even panned out, this picture was taken in 2017. So when we have a situation which comes to the limelight, everybody gets to look deeper into it. But many times we don't understand how that situation emerged. And because Chennai was suffering from water scarcity pretty much on an annual basis. And what happened after the 2015 flood, 2016 was a normal year, but 2017, 2018, and 2019, all three were drought years in the entire catchment in that particular region. So the drought occurred in 2017. People took it as a short water scarcity problem. Then the same thing occurred in 2018. It built on it. And 2019, people are worried about the day zero, where water had to be brought by trains and also from very distant sources to cater to the urban population. Of course, these two are situations which people are aware of, but something which in India people also end up living with. Many times we don't talk about urban flooding. We always talk about it as water stagnation or water logging. And we take it as a norm, at least in the urban spaces. And that leads to a lot of issue. When you look in terms of water stagnation, that leads to vector-borne diseases, but also the water being around and getting you know, issues such as poor sanitation and also waste management leads to polluting of water both on the surface and also on the ground, leading to waterborne diseases. So we should look at this particular situation more deeply. And as we speak in India today, apart from the COVID, there is also huge cases of malaria, dengue, and chikungunya, which is panning out. And even though that is not coming into the main news front because people are more concerned about COVID, the situation is becoming worse year on year. And in that particular context, we should also look in terms of the urban planning landscape. And this is something which is very important, because here, in terms of the urban flood management, it is always the district administration which comes into play. And of course, within the district, we also have a development area where building permissions are given to realtors to even construct before even they could get their municipal services. And then once those construction do take place and significant amount of population start residing in it, they are included and brought within the municipal corporation to provide certain basic services such as water supply, sewage, sanitation, and more importantly, with respect to flood management, it is the stormwater drainage. Otherwise, most of these constructions have open drains, and these open drains act as both sewer systems and also the stormwater systems, which further leads to contamination. The other key aspect, which is currently in India, is the 10-year planning cycle. Like I said, till 1990, our urban growth was 1% per decade. So in that particular context, the rules were formed so that master planning happens once in 10 years to cater to that 1% growth rate. Here now the population is getting doubled pretty much on a decadal basis, or there is a 10% increase, 10 to 11% increase in population, and that 1% is growth rate is happening per year and not per decade. And so there is a need for looking into that. How do you intervene into that 10-year cycle to plan for something which is changing every year? And the other key aspect which also one needs to take into account is our planning process. Many people still use the conventional land use, land cover based approaches. We divide the land use into parcels, into pockets, into zones, and also into certain territories, and then the land cover within that are predominantly defined. But this approach doesn't work, because in our urban area, most of our things work in network based things. Many things are below the ground. If you look in terms of water supply, if you look in terms of stormwater drainage, if you look in terms of electricity, now even with metros coming up, most of our service networks are below the ground, and understanding that is equally important. Some of the networks are also emerging above the ground. Right now, we are talking about cell phone towers. We are talking about internet and connectivity. We are talking about remote sensing and monitoring. We are talking about rainfall, the cloud accumulation, and also in terms of the cloud movement. And then we also have quite a bit of connectivity over the ground in terms of flyovers, in terms of bridges, and so on and so forth. So how do we bring this complex systems of which are, some are above the ground, some are below the ground, and some are on top of the ground, and some are based on virtual networks. So the conventional land use, land cover based approaches no longer work, at least when it comes to urban planning, but that is something which we have been following, and that is pretty much the law of the land. In this context, given the risk and given the planning rules and given the urban landscape, cities are also filled with institutions. And if you look in terms of water management per se, of course, municipal corporation is in charge of supplying the water, providing, some do provide stormwater drainage, but then there are more than 16 to 17 different organizations, at least in many of our major cities, which work in the area of water. So there are irrigation departments which control the water in reservoirs. There is Department of Environment. There is also departments which are working in terms of the climate change. Of course, there is the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change. Of course, we also have Central Pollution Control Board, which looks in terms of the pollution, and IMD, which provides Met Department, which provides warning. And of course, there are citizens, industries, private sector, which also have a key role to play in water. And some of them have their own systems to manage. Say they have an underground tank, they have an overhead tank, and they also manage water getting from the ground. And some people even have their own small water bodies or lakes which they manage within their area. So in this, there is all these different government institutions need to work in tandem for water management, and that is a very critical aspect. Whenever we come up with a solution, probably it may work for one department or one organization, and it may not be working with another organization, or it may come within an institutional mandate of one organization, and it may not. It is important, or it may be important for them to coordinate with multiple other institutions and organizations in terms of data collection, analysis, and management. So this is the larger context within which we the cities in India function. Of course, there is a realization of changing and varying climate, and there is a realization of more flood events happening. Of course, along with it is the issue of our planning systems, bylaws, and regulations which do exist. And of course, we also have a very complex institutional structure for addressing the water management. So why is it the way it is? And what things need to be changed within it or need to be considered? This one of the key aspects which we all take for granted is the water coming from the reservoirs or from reservoirs to the river and therefore to the city. So the reservoirs in India, many people don't know that they were all constructed as a part of 1960 to 1980s effort towards modernizing India. And most of the reservoirs were constructed, they were all part of the multipurpose dam projects. And the main purpose, if you look in terms of the rules and regulation, was to cater to irrigation. And then the secondary nature of the dam was to also generate power. And the third one is also to cater to industries. The catering to urban areas was never a mandate of any of these dams which were built in India. But ultimately, right now, in almost all the major cities, they either fetch the water from a reservoir within their purview, or they do get it from a far off distance, either through a canal system or the natural drainage systems. So it's important to understand the management rules which currently exist. And many of these rules, like I said, they were all designed in a pre-1970 numbers and data sets which no longer work in current context. The second thing is our urban development and fabric is also heavily, moved towards people who are migrants. And when you look in terms of the rivers, floodplains, and embankments, of course, in India, majority of the people who have moved from rural area to urban area, they don't understand the complexity of the flooding. Like the graph which we saw, once if the flood is going to occur once in every 5 years, and if a new migrant comes in and finds an open area, they think that it's the right place to settle because it is cheaper, or because that is the only place left for them, which is a high risk zone. And what really happens is, over time, they start to realize that that this area gets flooded, and by the time they start to get realizing that they have already invested in their infrastructure, the building getting a permanent building and so on and so forth. Of course, there is a political lobbying which takes place because they become a key to, they are voting citizens, so they have the right to raise their point of providing or asking for certain protection against flood. And what the government does, or the irrigation department, they end up constructing embankments. And once they construct embankments within the floodplain, then there is a false sense of security which gets created, that we are in a very safe zone. And then they start investing more around that particular area. And this is a picture from Vijayawada, which is along the Krishna River. And if you look in terms of it, the first embankment, which is on the top, was constructed when people started settling in the floodplain. And this embankment was constructed to avoid people from getting affected. Then people actually went over the embankment and started constructing their houses around it. And then the second embankment was constructed to protect those people. And then the third embankment, and then the fourth embankment. So overall, if you look at the current situation, there are still houses which are falling, new houses which are falling beyond the embankment level, and they are heavily in the floodplain. So that's something which we need to change. The floodplain is not a place for people to settle, and rather than creating false sense of security by, of course, constructing an embankment has different purposes. But constructing an embankment to protect life is no longer the case, because it creates a false sense of security which enables more and more people to settle in that particular location. And nalas and drains are a very critical component of flood management, also the urban ecosystem, both in terms of the water management. But in our country, we look at nalas and drains as a place to dump waste, and also they are heavily polluted. So the word nala itself gets a very negative connotation. Nobody smiles, or nobody has a positive impact like, I'm going to get a house constructed close to a drain. They won't say that, because for us, the drains are a place which, instead of collecting stormwater, it collects sewers. It becomes a sewer network, open sewer network. And this is a picture from Balkapur, and you may see that it is in one of the poshest area, that is the Banjara Hills in Hyderabad. And if you look at it, the both sides of the drain, the walls are being raised, so nobody wants to see the water which is flowing through. Nobody wants to enjoy the scenery. And this also creates a mechanism, this also creates a situation where people can easily throw their garbage over the wall into the nala and forget about it. Because when you don't see it, then you don't realize the extent of problem. And if you look at the right side, people have gone overboard to break the wall so that they can easily throw their garbage, because they don't even want to dump the garbage over the wall. So they made it easy for themselves, so that they made they broke the wall. And these things complicate the further water management and also the flood management. So whenever you design a drain for carrying certain amount of water, when somebody breaks it, either by mistake or on purpose, it has a different, the nala starts to behave differently during the monsoon. And it's also important that with the growth, what we are doing to our other water bodies, and also the green areas, there is a mandate. The 𝗦𝗲𝗽𝗂𝗃 guidelines clearly indicates that 12% of municipal corporation area should be green cover. Of course, the 12% is at a master planning level, but actually when you look in terms of the reality, the extent of imperviousness, even within the green zones, are quite higher. I've seen paved parkings in parks. I don't know why would people want to pave the area so much that it prevents the infiltration, and also it caters more to the runoff, leading to flood. This is an image of Chennai in 1980, and if you look at the left side of the image, you can actually see quite a lot of water bodies and green areas. And if you look at the recent 2011 image, actually all those water bodies are pretty much lost. They have been covered with development, and people slowly occupy that land. It's given to the realtors, it is sold, and until and unless we don't start to maintain water bodies within urban areas, the nature of the urban flood is going to change quite drastically with the extent of the imperviousness. And of course, there are other aspects of the imperviousness also. It also increases the heat. It has a small impact on the extent of rainfall, because sometimes the heat creates certain barriers for the clouds, and it can have a differential effect on the precipitation. And also it has an impact on the other aspects such as health. So what we are doing in that particular context, while cities are growing, we are constructing bigger and bigger stormwater drainage systems. And in most of our Indian cities, the stormwater drains are used only for 96 hours out of the 365 days, because that is the average, rainfall hours, number of hours in which the most cities get their rains. Of course, the monsoon season is for 3 to 4 months. Within the monsoon season, you have few days where you get the rainfall, and within those few days, you have certain number of hours where you get your majority of water. And in order to do that, we are developing or constructing stormwater drains which are much bigger than the seaward drain. And we are investing huge amount of money in maintaining the system during non-monsoon time, which is 9 months in a year. So the system has to be constructed, huge amount of investments have to be made, and the high degree of maintenance. And still, if the stormwater drain coverage is not complete, or it doesn't extend throughout the city, of course, you will end up getting floods in few parts. And that is the complexity, whether the city government should invest that huge amount of money and maintain an infrastructure which is used for a very little time, and but it has a huge purpose. If there are no stormwater drains, pretty much there will be a huge impact on the roads and also other infrastructure which are being constructed. So given the scenario, this is pretty much the status across most Indian cities. But all said and done, there are certain positive elements. We have quite a bit of tools. The NDMA has a set of guidelines for urban flood management, and this has been existing since 2008, and it pretty much details about what are the do's and don'ts for governments, more importantly, district administration and state governments, to mainstream flood management as a part of their ongoing strategy. Also, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in 2017 and 2018 had launched the Urban Flood Standard Operating Procedure, because this is very much required. Like I said, there were multiple agencies which are coordinating water management in an urban area. And when so many agencies are involved in it, it is important to understand how best they can coordinate both pre-disaster, during disaster, and also a post-flooding event. And therefore, a detailed set of standard operating procedure currently exists. And of course, how many cities are mainstreaming it is the key question. Also recently, the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 had launched the Urban River Management Plan. This is one of the pioneering documents in the country, which places river as a center of master planning. How do you, rather than doing a master plan of the city and working it around the river, It focuses on water as a key element, and how can a city and its environment, you know, grow around such water bodies, at the same time maintaining those water bodies and preserving those water bodies as much as possible. And this is currently being rolled out in Kanpur, but it will be mostly applicable to all the cities along the Indo-Gangetic Plain. And there is also the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs recently launched the Climate Smart City Assessment Framework. And this pretty much comprises of 5 thematic areas, which includes urban planning, clean cover, and biodiversity. It also focuses on water management, and it also focuses on energy within water management. And so this is one of the integrated framework which is currently being launched and reported by more than 126 cities covering 115 million people. So this also has key aspects of flood management. This is also supported by relevant training and capacity building to municipal officials to mainstream urban flood management in India. And also within the smart cities, there is a strong focus on integrated command and control centers, ICCCs, and data observatories. Data has become a key focus. One of the key aspects when coordinating with multiple departments is also the data availability, data interoperability, and data usability, and also getting it in time becomes a critical issue. And how does one do that through open data platforms, through use of systems and tools and technology, and use of multiple layers to inform the urban flood management. It becomes a very key aspect, and there is a strong focus, and 64 cities across the country are currently implementing the same. And of course, India, being a developed country, is already having several satellites, and the key one, Kalpana, is focused for weather management. So we pretty much have weather information and weather forecasts every 15 minutes. There are also more number of weather radars which are being constructed across the country, and already we have pretty much the cyclone warning centers in almost all the coastal states and metropolitan cities. And there is also a huge amount of advancement which is happening in terms of the IoTs. And earlier people used to go and physically record the weather information, but nowadays we have automated weather stations, which eases the process of information collection. And also the cost of these things have come down drastically, enabling even households to purchase them and have their own weather station located to provide additional information for taking informed decisions. And of course, one key aspect which we should not forget about today's world is also the advancement in terms of our communication and awareness and all those things. With the recent social media, I think people are able to get information quite quickly. Departments and governments are able to react quite quickly, and there are also multiple other information which can be secured from it. So this is one of an effort which was made where, based on the social media channels, especially the Twitter and the Facebook blogs and posts, one can generate flood map without even going to the city or looking in terms of dynamics. It is asking people around the city how much your area is flooded, and based on it creating a heat map in terms of where need or what kind of need emerges at which location, and what kind of support needs to be rolled out. And these kinds of technologies are quite handy, especially when it comes to managing flood. And of course, there is a huge increase in the number of NGOs and NGOs working in this particular sector. And of course, the youth participation and the interest, and this particular talk is also a reflection of the same, that there are quite a number of people who are enthused about, developing better systems or creating or supporting in creating better systems. So there is a larger awareness which is going to be a very critical factor as we move towards building flood resilience. And so what does flood resilience look like? Of course, these technologies are available which can enable people to implement certain things. One is coming up with an integrated framework. Of course, there are multiple frameworks which are available globally. This is one of the water resilience framework developed by 𝗏𝗏, where you need to appreciate the complexity of the urban water management. If you don't appreciate the complexity, you will not be in a position to respond to flood. You may create a map, but the flood map doesn't really solve the problem. But understanding the complexity helps us not only create better products, but also communicate it well with various stakeholders, so that multiple actions can take place in an integrated manner. The first and foremost thing is the dam management. We have to change our dam management rules, criteria, guidelines, and also the forecasting. Of course, there are a lot of AI, ML based approaches which are existing, and I think that is the way to go. Our conventional system of recording it on a paper-based registers and ledgers are not going to work. Most of the dams, like I said, were designed taking into consideration the rainfall or the rainfall pattern from 1901 to 1960s or 1970s. But with the recent climate variability, new factors and new uncertainty needs to be incorporated. Also, urban flood should be included as a part of their mandate, not only urban flood management, but also urban water supply. So therefore, there could be a duality, because when you look in terms of our GDP, cities contribute to more than 33% of most states' GDP. And whereas the water supply required for managing cities are only 3 to 4%. So why can't the dam authorities allocate sufficient water to promote both economic activity and also promote resilience within urban areas is a key question. Urban floodplain management. This includes both nalas and also rivers and the riverlets. This is a nice map. This is from the Rotterdam Port Authority. This is a real-time dynamic information which is currently available online. Anybody can go there and check what is the tide level, which way the water is currently flowing, how much amount of water is going to get collected, and whether my house or my property or my business is going to be inundated in case of an extreme event. This kind of an information should be made available to public. This helps people to internalize the problem and try to manage the problem in the most effective manner. When you don't present the information because people are worried that they may scare them, they may actually prevent businesses from coming to certain cities, so on and so forth. But providing more information enables them to be confident, to be more pre-prepared for it. And actually, it has helped the Rotterdam, the businesses around the Rotterdam port grow substantially over the last 10 to 15 years. Even they have done multiple other efforts leading to it. But I think floodplain management and flood information, making it visible to people is going to be very critical things. And as cities grow, we need to have city disaster management cells. I think this is one of the key mandates which has been proposed both by NDMA and also the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Right now, disaster management is most of the cities which are getting benefited are the capital cities, because they have the state disaster management cell within the city municipal corporation. But that doesn't work. A city should have its own disaster management cell, especially flood risk and heat risk management is something which they need municipal, uh, they need to be situated within the municipal corporation so that the workforce is better informed, better planned, and better coordinated. And Mumbai is the first city to establish such a cell, and it is a fully functional cell. And I think more cities in India should move towards the direction of having their own city disaster management. The third thing is the hazard risk and vulnerability. Actually, this is something which needs to be integrated as a part of the master planning and city development. And this is a case from Da Nang city, Vietnam, where they were trying to look in terms of a coastal area development. And based on, that was a time when the typhoon Haiyan had a huge caused huge damage, and the city authorities took note of it, and they tried to map all the hotspots based on it, and that basically informed their development, city development and master planning effort by avoiding those areas. So these green areas and these parks and open areas which you see in the plan were not as a part of their initial strategy. But after the cyclone, they realized that these areas should not be disturbed, and that led to a different approach in terms of the city planning. So every city should have hazard risk and vulnerability mapped, and this is more important in terms of the flood hazard. Therefore, that can inform not only the master planning, but also various infrastructure which are emerging into the city. Even while building a house or constructing a structure, that risk information can inform them what kind of plinth they need to bring in, what kind of elevation they need to bring in, and so on and so forth. And early warning systems currently are, we all depend only on IMD, the Met department, for our warning and for our effort. But Met department, the scale they work doesn't cater to the city level. They work at a level which caters to a particular catchment or a particular region, and they are not really responsible for flooding which are caused because of the water release from the dams or choking of nalas and drains and things like that. Of course, they can say that there's going to be 40 mm of rainfall, but whether the 40 mm is going to cause urban flooding is a very, very localized case. Therefore, there should be more and more early warning systems developed and implemented at a city level. And this particular thing is already underway. Surat is one of the cities which are having a functional flood early warning system, starting from the catchment, the Ukai catchment, to the city level, including their tidal movement in the port of Hazira. So there are more cities coming up into it. After the 2015 flood, Chennai started developing their own city level early warning system for urban floods. And there is also a discussion within the Odisha government, and the state water resource department has developed their own early warning system post because of the recurrent cyclones in the country, in that area. And when, like we discussed, it is important to reduce the extent of impervious surfaces. We have to make a conscious effort to do that. Of course, paved surfaces have their own advantage. We all don't like to get our shoes dirty, but I think in an urban area, the decrease in impervious surfaces is very much the need of the hour. This is an initiative which was undertaken by Paris, where they realized that not only it is useful for flood management, but it also reduces the urban heat island effect to a larger degree. And they also wanted to create cooler spaces where aged people can reach within their neighborhood and community. So what they did was they took up 2000 plus schools and made a mandate to convert almost all their open areas into green areas, where it could be used for both heat management and also for water retention. The runoff gets reduced, infiltration gets increased, and also the flood used for flood management. Just following up on that, I think the multiple use of water and water resource structures, water management structures, is also the need of the hour. In India, we tend to close most of the water bodies and we don't make it visible because of the smell, because of the extent of waste. But that is not the right strategy to go towards. This is an example from Singapore, where via the causeway which they are constructed, they make it open for public to come, view, interact, and also enjoy and take benefit. They have a lot of water activities which are planned around it, and there is also a viewing gallery, and they make the water visible, even though this is quite a big structure, but it houses multiple, it also has a museum, it also has a viewing gallery, it also has a place where people can come and know about water within their city. So these are water living labs should be created across Indian cities, and water education should be brought about, and also awareness should be brought about. What is the state of water? Why floods are being caused? Where floods are being caused? How things can be done? What individuals can do to avoid it? So they follow the 4R approach: the recycle, reuse, reduce the usage of water, rainwater harvesting, and so on and so forth. So similar kind of approaches should be taken for flood management, because we see flood occurring over a short duration, but that is occurring because we have created systems over a long term to cater to that. And cities such as Rotterdam are creating structures from altogether a different perspective. How do you store the water, retain the water, and extend the duration over which they can be slowly drained out using our conventional systems? So they have started, this is a basketball court. So on a normal day, one can go and play basketball or sit around and, use it as a public space. But during monsoon, this is a flood retention structure. So it captures the water and it stores the water so that the drainage systems are not overloaded, and the water is drained off in a very slow manner over a period of an hour or 2 hours to avoid flooding. This is creating areas of conscious flooding within cities for better management. And this is also an example from Surat. How can you make flood visible? The lamppost over there is marked with different color coding, indicating the extent of water that will be coming into that particular area for every different dam release. So for whenever some authorities say that 2 lakh cusecs has been released or 4 lakh cusec has been released, a common man does not get what that means to them. So, but when they come to the lamppost, they can always see, if 8 lakh cusec is released, my area will be inundated to such a level. So I need to take care, I need to prepare. Also, this helps in, this helps to avoid buying properties in floodplains. Whenever you go to a realtor, they always try to oversell the building. But when you have such markings available across the cities, people are informed when they go and buy property, especially in a risk prone area and zone. And we should also take disasters as a window of opportunity. This is one of the things that we can learn from both New York and also Puerto Rico. Post their cyclone, they realized that we need to build back better. We don't end up recreating the same problem. Can we completely rethink the way in which infrastructures are being designed and catered to? Sometimes it is very difficult to convince people during normalcy, but post-event, post a disaster, people are always open to new ideas, and they are more upcoming to also providing recommendation what should not be there. And so these should be taken up as windows of opportunity. Like I said, Puerto Rico did that after the Hurricane Maria. New York did that, and a lot of cities across the world are slowly starting to do that. Los Angeles is doing that after their heat and forest fire disasters which happened recently. So with that, I'll stop, and we'll be happy to take a few questions. So, of course, the key aspect is usually we jump to conclusions and we jump to solutions for urban flood management. I think while we do that, it's important to get both the macro and also the micro picture, and also look in terms of the context, both the political context, the administrative context, and also the social context. And then strategizing not for today, what needs to be done, but taking into account how the city should be 30 years down the line or 40 years down the line is a very key aspect.
So thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. Okay, so thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation. I think young professionals and students who will be viewing this, they would have got to know a lot about various case studies such as Singapore, Surat, Vietnam, Paris, Rotterdam, Puerto Rico, and lots of things that you have highlighted. And also, an important thing that you told is not only flood management, it's also you need to do water management. Then you talk about flood management, or you can work simultaneously on both these things. You also mentioned about you should do something HVRA analysis, that is hazard vulnerability risk analysis at the city level, and also setting up various IoTs and use of technologies for flood management. Sir, wanted to ask one question in terms of institution, say in India. So like there is disaster management, district disaster management authority who manages the flood. If you talk about stormwater management, it is done by urban local body. So in any city in India, if it is vulnerable or in any city is more at a risk, and if you talk when the flood happens, the more action in terms of flood, in terms of storm reclaiming back the storm water is done by urban local body. In terms of disaster mitigation and like factors are done by disaster management authority. So how can this interdepartmental thing comes up, and what are your experience? You might have worked in a lot of these sectors, and there are lots of departments, as you rightly mentioned. There are 19 institutions you showed in the screen, and there are more. How can this interdepartmental organization work in flood management?
So that's why there has to be a platform for better coordination. If the flood exceeds the urban area, then it is the mandate of the district, it becomes a mandate of the district administration. And if it exceeds the district, then it becomes the mandate of the state disaster management authority. But if you have waterlogging covering 50% of the city, but it is within the city, then it is the responsibility of the urban local bodies to address the issue. And of course, it's not a simple solution to say that they need to coordinate, they need to work together. Therefore, what we have been doing, at least I've been trying to do through the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, is creating a systematic approach. Usually you provide funds for developing some mitigating or adaptation measures. Instead of providing funds for that, create fund for systemic improvement of institutions. Do you have a data collection center? Are you collecting data from multiple departments, or is the data being made available openly? Is a committee or a cell which is being formed to develop flood resilience strategies? If the committee or the cell is formed, are they meeting regularly, once every 3 months or 4 months? And is the meeting leading to integrated urban flood resilience strategy, which is long term, which looks in terms of the next 10 years, 20 years? Is it being informed within the master plan? Does the master plan, at least, even if it is not included as a part of master planning, because master planning is a 10-year effort still, is it informing the city development, city infrastructure development? And then we talk about financing. Once these systems are in place, then you provide money for any adaptation measures or mitigation measures. It makes more sense. Otherwise, many times people say that we don't have funds, but doing all these things, you don't need funds. You need intent, and you need a good set of stakeholders to be brought in who can coordinate and manage it. Many times, most universities, well-known universities, are anyway situated within the cities. I think they can take a key role of coordinating it and working with the municipal corporation. There are good NGOs. Sometimes there are chambers of commerce which may take a lead, and in some cases, the city administration themselves take a lead. And currently, the smart city SPVs provide a nice vehicle for them to take a lead to, because you need a neutral agency to bring all these multiple stakeholders together. And most cases, IMD does that. Wherever there is a cyclone warning centers which are existing in India, or IMD regional department is there, they become the central agency who invites people. But unfortunately, they do it only once in or twice in a year, pre-monsoon and during monsoon. And their mandate is not to inform the city development. Their mandate is to just make sure people understand the warning which they are going to provide. So that needs to change.
Yes. And also, as a young professional being me, I was curious to know about when you talked about that 96 hour out of 365 days the stormwater drain works. So I was really, how can we manage this for all other days? As we are planning, if we are planning for flood for 1 in 2 years, 1 in 5 years, and 1 in 100 years. So how can we manage this 96 hours, or how can we manage the other for the storm?
So I think one key fact is that we have to live with floods, and avoiding the floods is no longer the case, because the urban fabric or the urban development has already taken place, and the structures are already put in place. You cannot change the stormwater drainage to cater to once in 50 years or once in 70-year event, because there is a huge amount of investment will be required. New cities which are coming up, new urban local bodies which are in the process of constructing such stormwater drains, of course, they can take that written period into consideration and develop something around it. But for cities which are existing, cities will be flooded, and we need to learn to live with floods. And the good thing about it is the floods are not lasting for long. Even if you take the case of Mumbai, even if you take the case of Chennai, and also New York, within a week, they are going to bounce back to the business as usual approach. There will be some areas where waterlogging will be there, but the city will come back to its normalcy within a 3 or 4 day period. So the idea is, how do you manage that 3 or 4 days without your city systems getting disrupted is the key to living with the floods.
And sir, just a curiosity question, last question was about the recent framework that arrived from IPCC AR5. This was published recently. It talks about in the next 50 years, how will India is going to change in terms of climate change. So what is your viewpoint in that?
whatever IPCC is saying is pretty true, and they have declared it as code red because they want the administrators to take note of it. It is no longer uncertain. There are certain things which are very certain, like urban floods. It's going to occur. You can delay it, you can avoid it. You can create systems to make sure that the flooding happens in a desired location and not throughout the city. You can ensure that your critical systems function. Like if you want to have a generator or an inverter or a battery to provide electricity, don't keep it on the ground floor, keep it on the first floor or something like that. People need to be prepared and planned to manage those events. But there needs to be a larger concerted efforts which need to be taken at both the national government level, state government level, and city government level. And therefore, whatever IPCC has come up with code red, it's very important. But unfortunately, there are two reactions, large reactions, which comes up. When people are confronted with a shock, they either freeze and they don't react to it, or they come under fear and react to it and start doing work. So in the later case, that's not a big issue. There are some people who are aware of it, and there are too many good city champions, city administrators across the country who are at least in the thinking about taking measures. But for people who get stumped, therefore the resilience alternatives. There are simple things which can be done without much funding. There are things where society can be brought into play. You don't need a complex hydrological modeling to understand where the flooding takes place. All you need to ask the people around, and they will tell you where the flooding is going to take place. So we have alternate approaches available, and we should be more innovative, creative, and we should be contextual. And IPCC, whatever projections they are giving, it needs to be contextualized to a city. And that is what is the critical challenge, and communicating. So when I talk to people, I try to avoid IPCC because people get afraid and they don't react. So rather than talking about the doomsday scenario, talk about possible options for intervention, and that creates a very good starting point. But that said, I hope people take the recent findings and the code red very seriously, and hopefully climate actions are implemented at both scale and also in the relevant context across Indian cities.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful masterclass. And I hope all the viewers who will be viewing this have got to know a lot of good learnings about case studies and various best practices that have been working across the country. So thank you once again, sir, for being on this.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, sir.